Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, and welcome to another Tech Takeaways. And as always, I'm joined by my dynamic, to pinch a phrase, dynamic co-host, Jason Fitzgerald. Hi, Jason. How you doing?
Hello. Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yeah. You sure?
I am absolutely thrilled to be here.
Excellent. Yeah. That's what I like to hear. So, well, on this episode and next week's episode, we're doing one of our favourite things, and we do these occasionally, is we're kind of going to do a couple of day in the life episodes. Yeah. So to join us and talk about some IT days in lives, I'm joined by John Fazakerley. Hi, John. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm even more thrilled to be here.
Even more thrilled? More thrilled than Jason?
Yeah. If it's possible.
Yeah, to be fair, you look more thrilled than Jason, so that's
it's just
thing.
My face. It's just the way my face is.
Yeah, well, we've had that conversation. We'll leave that for an offline conversation about faces. So well, look, hey, before we jump in, John, so you're head of IT at Liverpool Airport, or Liverpool John Lennon Airport. Please give it its full name. Yeah. But before we jump in talking about days in lives, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little about who you are, what it is you do.
Yeah, I'm John Fazakerley, like I say, head of IT, Liverpool John Lennon Airport. Been there coming to 18 years. Season ticket holder for my sins at Everton. Excited for the new ground, still waiting for a tour. Yeah.
If anybody's listening,
if anyone's listening, please do.
Yeah,
big fan of games, got an arcade machine. It's my pride and joy. And yeah. That's
and we were just chatting about Mortal Kombat.
We were.
Yeah, so if there's any kind of blood splatter going on over my shoulder, that's what's.
Yeah, we need like an 18 rating on this podcast now.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. So 18 years at the airport. So I mean, what did you do before that? Is this kind of your first IT role?
Yeah, it is really. I was always quite good at IT and maths, so I decided to do IT at uni because maths sounded a bit more boring.
And plus, big money's in IT. I mean,
this is it. So post-uni, I was like, right, I've had enough of that. I don't want to sit in front of a computer all my life. I'll be a primary school teacher, obviously. You can see the path.
Yeah. Okay.
Applied for a course, didn't get on that year. Thought I'll apply next year. In the meantime, a job came up at the airport. I was like, I can do that for a few months before I apply again. Here we are 18 years later.
Yeah. Have they responded to the application yet?
No, still waiting.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It's not you. It's them.
It's definitely not me.
Yeah. So head of IT now. So what's kind of been the progress through the time? So how have you ended up from whatever the job was that you applied for to the one you've got today?
So I think actually my first job title was desktop support analyst. And essentially it was sitting in the office waiting for a phone call that something had broke. Yeah. But typically we're talking 17, 18 years ago, it was my computer isn't working. Oh, the printer needs more paper. That was the extent of it.
Yeah.
And obviously it's incredibly changed since then in terms of the remit and how much.
Has the printer got paper in now?
The printer, fortunately, is under a contract.
Excellent.
So, out of my hands. And then I've had several job titles since. Supervisor, manager, and then my most recent one is head of.
So IT inside of an airport, so for lots of people who watch and listen to this show, we're used to delivering IT in all ranges of businesses, manufacturing, professional services, etc. But obviously airports fall into a slightly different sector in that they are classed as critical infrastructure. Yeah. So does that, how does that change your role? What kind of, do you feel there's things that you focus on that are a little bit different because it's critical infrastructure? Do you have some different demands that are enforced on you as well as part of that?
Yeah, so just like any business, we've got the standard things. We've got email and files and the office kind of infrastructure. And then, like you rightly say, we've got a lot of critical infrastructure. So operationally, we've got to make sure our systems are working. And, should they be off for a minute or two, that can have a devastating impact to the operation. So we really have to, when we're planning these systems out, look at sort of resilience, uptime, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a greater reliance on those sort of factors when putting systems in. And obviously that can also really affect the day-to-day things in terms of what we prioritise.
So, Jace, I realised that apart from you saying, I'm excited to be here, I've not let you get a word in so far. Why don't you get a word in?
No, I think that this is really interesting, actually, because when you look at airports, generally, when they don't work as they should, they make the news. And you've got holiday makers in big long queues with big suitcases with their hats on and their shades, and they're going, I just want to go on holiday. And you don't think about what goes on behind the scenes to make that actually all happen. You know, like I've never sat and thought, I wonder how a plane goes from wherever it is to wherever it is, and all of the logistics involved with that. So when we're talking critical infrastructure, obviously you've got all of your kind of your standard stuff, you know, your files, your print, your emails. But when we're talking about that critical infrastructure, what does that look like? Is that cloud systems? Is that server infrastructure?
Yeah, the short answer is it's a massive combination of systems.
Yeah.
And so our approach has always been what best fits. So, you know, we're not all cloud, we're not all on-prem, we're an absolute combination of those things. So in the similar manner, we have systems that we look after, we have systems that third parties look after, and we have, I think coming back to your point earlier, we have systems that through Civil Aviation Authority and Department for Transport, we have to make sure we have in place, and they have to operate at certain levels.
Yeah, okay. And how do you look at cybersecurity with this as well? I'm responsible. Okay.
I'm what's known as the cybersecurity responsible manager in my case for my sins, one of my minor titles. My wife has a few others, but we don't need to get into that.
We haven't got that kind of
haven't got
rating.
that kind of rating. No blood there. So cyber's a massive part of that, because obviously everyone's realised, including airports and the government, that should these critical national infrastructure things be attacked, fundamental problems for the to and fro of the country effectively. So we really have to keep our cybersecurity. Have really stepped up essentially since a year or two before COVID. We really started accelerating cybersecurity programs, making sure we've got the best things in place to protect all these assets we've just been talking about from the various cyber threats that unfortunately are constantly evolving and changing from one day to the next.
And I mean, in terms of, maybe just a step back slightly, actually, in terms of kind of how you do your role. So as head of IT, so what are some of the things that you're responsible for, and how do you, what have you learned over time? Like you say, been 18 years, you've kind of evolved from, kind of help desk, desktop support analyst, that kind of thing. So you've evolved from that. So what kind of have you learned along the way? For people who were maybe watching and listening to this, who maybe are just getting into that role themselves or looking at that as a route for them, they want to be head of IT somewhere. What kind of things have you learned over that 18 years? Yeah.
So first thing, I don't think I ever wanted to be in charge personally, but it's just I just really enjoy getting involved. And I think being at the airport, one thing I've learned is, although it's a bit of a coined phrase, no 2 days are the same.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing about IT is it's constantly changing. And although I gave examples before how it changed from day one, just looking at computers and printers, to now looking at cybersecurity, networks, Wi-Fi, whatever it may be. I think the biggest lesson I've learned is to embrace change, because often in IT, we're the ones asking other people to make the change. Here's a brand new system you've never used before. That system you used to like. Yeah. Why don't you use this one? Even if we know it's for, in the end it'll be better, or it'll be of benefit to the company or whatever. Often we're the ones bringing about change. So it's to accept that change too, and always to be open to seeing what's out there, because we can get pretty comfortable with the products we know, the services we use, systems we use, and it's working, it's fine, let's carry on. I'd say the one thing I've learned is to continue to try and innovate and continue to try new things and see what works, and not be, I think it's a lesson for life really, isn't it? Not being afraid to fail, but obviously within, not with critical national infrastructure, obviously, but there are certain remits where, you can take a chance, you can try new things and see if it works out and iterate on it and improve things.
So I think that's a really interesting approach, and I think, actually, that's quite open, I think, because it's very easy in IT, and again, probably like you just talked about that human nature thing, isn't it? It's very easy for us to, I like that thing and I know that thing, I'm good at that thing. So whatever you do, I don't want to change it. We've all heard those conversations, haven't we, about, let's move infrastructure to cloud, and then, your IT guys who feed and water the servers in the data center. I don't want to move to cloud. And it's not that they don't want to move to cloud. It's just, but if we move to cloud, what's going to happen to me? Who's going to, I do this and I'm good at it. So is there anything that is there anything that you do for firstly for yourself, but then more broadly for the team who work with you? You know, is there anything that you do to kind of make sure you continue to encourage and foster that kind of, you know, that desire to be open to change?
Yeah, so we always encourage them to continue to have conversations, whether it be suppliers or potential suppliers. You know, I myself listen to a few podcasts, you know, keeping up to date on technology news, see what's out there. Sometimes you'll find a product or a solution will be introduced to us. Sometimes we'll go out and find a product. But yeah, I just encourage that openness. And, you know, we meet as a team, there's 3 of us. We meet on several times a week to discuss certain topics. And it's always open for people to throw in ideas, or I've seen this, have you heard about this? And it's a classic no idea is a bad idea sort of mantra. And I think although exactly like you said, you know, if we never changed, we'd still be riding horses, wouldn't we? So
yeah, I mean, that's how I got in today, but that's another conversation.
Stringy's horse.
Yeah, it's outside.
I thought it was upstairs.
So, I've got a story about horses being tied up outside, but that's a different, we haven't got time.
A different bar.
Yeah, it's
or saloon.
Yeah, I've not got time for that story. I mean, one of the things we talked about before we was recording that was interesting was that, you know, there was lots of things that was interesting, but not all of them we can share here. But, you know, you talked about actually the change during the pandemic, and how that changed the way that you look to drive IT decisions and IT adoption. So what was some of the things you learned from them? What are some of those things that you've kept kind of since that? Yeah,
so obviously, like everyone else, I don't think anyone had, even if they'd planned for disaster recovery situation or something.
How do you predict a global pandemic?
How do you predict exactly? And even though, you know, I'm sure some people exercise those things, it actually happening is an entirely different thing. Yeah. We certainly in IT hadn't predicted that. So we had to react. We had to react quickly. We had people working from home, etc., who'd never worked from home before. So an example for us is, you know, jumping into bed as it was with Teams, which we were already in the process of rolling
out.
Teams.
Microsoft
Teams, Not jumping into bed with our Teams.
Rapid adoption of Microsoft Teams,
Because remember in that summer it was very warm, so it would have been a bit hot and sweaty, wouldn't it? So a real, as you said, a really rapid adoption of those technologies. And I think when we were speaking earlier, I was saying now that sort of give us the green light to, do you know what, we can do things a bit quicker. I think previous to COVID, we'd take the approach of here's a new system, here's a change. Let's make sure everyone's happy. Let's have lots of meetings, email communication. Let everyone sign on the dotted line, they're happy. Oh, you know, Jane in accounts still doesn't get it. Let's pause a week. Let's come back to it. And it felt like sometimes nothing was ever gathering pace or getting done. With COVID, we had to make those decisions really quickly, really swiftly. I think that's something we've taken on when implementing or changing things. There is a point at which a product or a change is acceptable to the business, operationally, commercially, and that's at the point it goes live. And we try and not quite backfill, but we try and bring people on board with as much communication as possible, but by also setting hard lines in the sand of when we're switching to these things. And that gives us the ability to then move on to the next thing rather than things dragging and dragging and dragging. But yeah, it was quite a learning experience, that whole COVID time.
So, you know, as we kind of, and sorry, Jason, I appreciate I've not let you get many more words in.
It's fine, I've loved it.
Oh, it's good, yeah. You can ask all the tough questions next time. So, not any tough questions yet.
Fine.
But it's always the last one. It's always the last question that gets people. But you know, as we come to the end of kind of our time on this episode, you know, just out of interest, you know, for people who are in your role, developing in your role, you know, is there any kind of tips that you've learned over your time? You know, is there a couple of tips? We call this tech takeaways for a reason. Right. A couple of takeaways that actually you would share with somebody and say, you know, these are the kind of the things that I've learned, or if I were doing things again, I'd do these things differently.
Yeah, I think first one would be, if there's something you don't quite understand, go and learn about it. Yeah. If there's something that, you know, you push to one side and go, do you know, I don't quite understand that aspect, I'll just concentrate on the things I can do. Don't go and learn about those things. Broaden. So I've done this myself, and I've read it, you know, reading up on it, a book or watching a YouTube video even. I mightn't fully understand it, but it gives me knowledge around it, and it broadens the scope of your knowledge, even if it's not something you maybe perhaps going to concentrate in. It's always helpful to have a broad scope, even if you're, you know, a young guy or girl and decided I want to do specifically coding in this or whatever, if you've got that broader scope, it'll help you further your career and also understand what you're trying to achieve on a broader level.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip.
Every day is a school day in IT.
Yeah, that is very true. Apart from Sundays, where you try not to make it a school day. But John, look, it's been great. I think lots of really interesting insight there. And we're going to have another chat about but incident response is, I think, what we're going to talk about, which is timely because of when we're recording this. But we'll get to that. But for now, John, look, really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on these comfy sofas, and we'll look forward to chatting to you again very, very soon, in about a minute and a half. But it'll seem like a week for you guys. But for now, John, thanks for joining us on Tech Takeaways.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of Tech Takeaways, and hey, why wouldn't you? Then do subscribe and make sure you don't miss any future episodes. If you've got any comments or want to leave us any feedback, you can do so. And obviously, you can subscribe by clicking these buttons down here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from. But until next time, Jace, John, thanks for joining us on Tech Takeaways, and we'll see you all again soon.